Okay, so I need to talk about this. I just saw a headline that genuinely stopped me mid scroll. Next, yes, that Next, the high street clothing brand you've probably bought a school jumper or a pair of jeans from, is reportedly preparing a takeover bid for Harvey Nichols. I mean, the Harvey Nichols, yes. Crazy. And before you ask, no, nothing's been confirmed yet. This is still speculation. It's quite early stage. Both companies have basically said no comment as of yesterday. But the fact that this conversation can even exist right now says something. And I want to unpack that with you today because this isn't just about one department store. This is part of a much bigger, much stranger story that's been unfolding in luxury retail, honestly, since COVID. And today we're going to walk through all of it, piece by piece, and ask the question a lot of us have been quietly thinking. Is luxury slowly dying? Let's get into it. Okay, quick personal note before the news because I think it matters for context. So, Harvey Nichols is genuinely my favorite department store in London. Not Selfridges, not even Harrods. I know. It's a slightly controversial take, but here's why. For me, Selfridges and Harrods are incredible. Don't get me wrong, right? You go there for specific things when you know what you want to get, but they're always so packed. You literally cannot breathe in there half the time, specifically Selfridges, not so much Harrods, but it's still the same thing. And Harvey Nichols is the one place where you can actually walk around slowly, enjoy the window displays, browse without being swept along by a crowd. And I actually took my mom there when she visited London, and it was one of my favorite days with her. It's just so enjoyable there. And Harrods is genuinely where I go when I know what I want per se. And Harvey Nichols is just pretty much where I go when I just want to enjoy shopping as an experience. So when I saw this headline, it hit differently. This isn't some abstract corporate story to me. It's a shop I actually love, potentially being swallowed by a brand best known for what, 12-pound t-shirts and back to school uniforms? Insane. So, getting into the news, here's what we actually know. As of today, Sky News, Telegraph, Business of Fashion, these news outlets are all reporting that Next is preparing to launch a takeover bid for Harvey Nichols, the London founded luxury department store that's been trading since 1831. Imagine. Reuters picked up this story but said they couldn't independently verify it yet. Now, Harvey Nichols has declined to comment. Next didn't respond to requests for comments either. And crucially, the reporting is clear that these plans are still relatively early stage. So, to be fair to everyone involved, this could still fall apart. Early stage takeover talk doesn't always turn into an actual deal, right? But I think it's worth talking about right now in this early moment precisely because there isn't a lot of commentary on it. You know, sometimes the most interesting time to talk about something is before everyone else has piled on with their opinions, while it's still just a headline and a question mark, hence why we are discussing this today. And you know what? The question mark here is actually a very big one because this isn't Next's first move into territory that feels surprising, right? That leads me to Russell and Bromley. Let's talk about that. And this is the part that actually got me personally. So a few weeks ago, I was walking through London with a friend and noticed a Russell and Bromley store had closed down. Now, I didn't think much about it in the moment, but it turns out that Next had quietly acquired Russell and Bromley back in January of this year around that time through an insolvency process for just 2.5 million pounds. This is the part that shocked me. Like, let that sink in for a second. £2.5 million for a brand with that much heritage. Russell Bromley means something to me, okay? It's the shoe brand that my dad has loved for as long as I can remember. Ever since I was a kid, I grew up watching him wearing them, and he actually bought me my first pair of Russell Bromley sandals when I was a kid. And trust me, man, when I tell you, I wore those things until they genuinely gave up on me. That's how much I really loved them. So that's not a brand I associate with financial distress, if I'm being honest. This is a brand that I associate with quality and longevity. And yet here we are, bought out of insolvency for less than the price of a decent London flat or house. So when the Harvey Nichols story broke, it didn't feel random. It almost felt like a pattern to me. Next, acquiring footwear brands through insolvency in January, and then reportedly circling one of the most iconic luxury department stores in the country just months later. Come on, man. Like, whether or not the Harvey Nichols deal actually happens, Next is clearly signaling something, an appetite to absorb heritage and luxury brands cheaply while they're vulnerable. And that word vulnerable is really the theme of everything else that I want to talk about today. Because here's the thing, Russell and Bromley and Harvey Nichols aren't isolated stories. They're part of a much longer list that's been building since the pandemic. And once you start lining them up side by side, it starts to feel less like a coincidence and more like a trend. I actually made a whole separate video about Everlane getting acquired by Shein, which honestly still feels like a strange sentence to say out loud. And that's just the mid-premium end of things, right? On the full luxury end, the casualties list is getting long. Barneys, Saks, Farfetch, Matches Fashion. Now, let's go through them because I think the details actually matter here. Let's start with Saks because this one's been a slow motion story. So Saks Global, the parent company that owns Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, and Bergdorf Goodman, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy after its 2024 merger with Neiman Marcus left it carrying a mountain of debt. To be clear, Chapter 11 isn't the same thing as going out of business, right? It's pretty much a restructuring process. And Saks secured around $1.75 billion in financing to keep going. But keep going has meant serious cuts, right? Around 21 full-line stores were closed, including a chunk of Saks Fifth Avenue locations. And nearly all of the off-price Saks Off Fifth stores were shut down too. There was also a period where Saks straight up couldn't pay its vendors on time, which led to empty shelves and stock shortages in stores. That's really never a good sign for a luxury retailer whose entire appeal is exclusivity and availability. And then just last week, June 27th, Saks Global exited bankruptcy under a brand new name, which is Exemplar Luxury Group. According to Vogue Business, the rename is meant to signal a fresh chapter, one that's focused on high-touch service across its three banners, which are Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, and Bergdorf Goodman. The CEO, Jeffrey Van Raemdok, I hope I'm saying that properly, who interestingly came from Neiman Marcus originally, so he described it as reflecting the shared standard of excellence across the group. So Saks isn't dead, but it needed a bankruptcy, a name change, and a serious downsizing to survive. That's not nothing. And then there's Barneys New York, which I still think about honestly. So Barneys officially closed its doors for good back in February 2020, right on the edge of the pandemic, after its own Chapter 11 filing and an acquisition of the brand by Authentic Brands Group. The story there was brutally simple: sky-high rent, growing e-commerce competition, and debt that just became unsustainable. What made it sting was that Barneys had actually hoped to keep its iconic Manhattan flagship store open. But under the new ownership, even that got shut. Barneys had also nearly collapsed once before, back in the 1990s, so this wasn't its first downhill story per se. It just didn't survive the second time. Now, Farfetch, that is a slightly more hopeful story, at least on paper, right? The luxury e-commerce platform came dangerously close to insolvency before it was acquired by the South Korean tech and retail giant Coupang back in early 2024. It's technically still operating, yes, but just under new ownership. And it's had to shut down entire divisions like its business to business software arm, which I believe is called Farfetch Platform Solutions. And they did that to streamline and refocus on its core marketplace. And then we have Matches Fashion, which is maybe the most dramatic of the bunch. So Matches shut down its original operations and its e-commerce site entirely on June 30th of 2024 after its parent company placed it into administration. It genuinely ceased to exist for a while, but its brand and intellectual property were bought up by a new luxury group called Hulken, which has announced plans to relaunch the platform, reportedly backed by around $150 million from investors including LVMH's venture arm and members of the Hermes family. So even in death, there's some very serious money betting that a version of Matches is worth resurrecting. Interesting. So let's keep our eye out on this one and keep our fingers crossed. So, really, is luxury dying? Okay, so here's where I actually want to slow down and think about this properly, because I don't think the honest answer is a simple yes or no. On one hand, look at the list we just went through, right? Barney's gone entirely, Matches collapsed and had to be revived by outside investors. Saks needed nearly like $2 billion and a full rebrand just to keep the lights on. Russell Bromley swallowed for a couple £1 million through insolvency. And now potentially Harvey Nichols, one of the most recognizable names in British luxury retail. What, being circled by a high street clothing chain? Now, if you would have told me 5 years ago that Next might end up owning Harvey Nichols, I don't think I would have believed you, honestly. But on the other hand, and I think this is the more interesting read, right? None of these brands are disappearing into nothing, which is great. They're just being bought, every single one of them. So someone somewhere still believes that there's real value locked inside these names. I mean, Coupang didn't let Farfetch die, they bought it, right? LVMH's venture arm and the Hermes family are still backing Matches Fashion's relaunch, right? We have Authentic Brands Group, which bought Barney's name even after the stores closed. And Next isn't randomly picking companies. It's specifically targeting brands with decades, sometimes centuries of heritage and customer loyalty already built in, which is obviously different from what the Next brand alone has access to. So maybe what we're actually watching isn't the death of luxury. Maybe it's a very brutal but very fast reshuffling of who owns it. So the old model, the heritage brand, family run or independently owned, propped up by flagship stores on prime real estate, that model seems to be genuinely struggling under the weight of rent, e-commerce competition, and post-COVID shifts in how people actually shop today. But the demand for luxury itself, the emotional pull of these names, that really hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's actually why bigger players keep swooping on in to buy the wreckage. It reminds me a bit of something bigger organizations go through generally. When you're expanding fast, competition for resources internally gets fiercer too, right? The same scarcity mindset that makes brands fight over prime real estate and flagship budgets is basically playing out at a company level here. Next isn't just buying stores, it's buying position. Essentially, what we're seeing right now is Next's attempt at buying a seat at a table that it never really sat at before. And you know what? I can't be mad at it. I can't be mad at it. All I can do is just observe, watch, and learn. So where does that leave Harvey Nichols? Honestly, we don't know yet. This is still quite early. It's unconfirmed and both sides are staying quiet. Valid. But if the pattern from Russell and Bromley tells us anything, it's that Next moves fast and they move cheap when a brand is vulnerable. And that should worry anyone who loves Harvey Nichols the way that I do, okay? Since COVID, watching this industry has genuinely felt chaotic, but interesting, right? We've been seeing one closure, bankruptcy, surprise acquisition after another. But I generally don't think that it's the end of luxury. I think it's a changing of hands. And whether that's a good thing or a sad thing probably depends on whether the new owners understand what made these brands special in the first place and keep it, or whether they just see a discounted price tag and a name people still trust. Who knows? We'll be watching very closely, I guess. I'll be keeping a close eye personally on the Harvey Nichols story as it develops. And if there's any real update, you know I will be back here to talk about it. If you've got thoughts on this, whether you think Next buying Harvey Nichols would be a disaster or actually a smart move, let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you guys think. And if you enjoyed watching this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I post weekly videos here talking about all things at the intersection of creativity and business. And as I always say to my lovely watchers, you are built different, built to last. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.